You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, July 19th, 2024.
And hey, look, let's be honest, it's still been warm.
Still hot.
But, not as hot, at least in Seattle.
Yeah, no, temperatures dropped here. That's just, let's just get the Weathercast out of the way. Today, the day of this recording, you know what? A Tuesday. Let's just tell you that. It was record lows for the season. Only hit 90. Cooling down in the evening, not so much. It still might become a no pants recording episode. Who knows?
And I'll say, my phone and my watch say the high today in Seattle was either 86 or 90 degrees.
It's nice to have a margin of error.
Yeah, I actually, to this, we've talked about it. I have no idea why my watch and my phone are reporting different temperatures, because in theory, the watch is only connected to my phone. So like, my dude, you're getting your data from the same place.
Right.
But yeah, so either way, it was either 86 or 90 degrees. But actually, it's been, having said that, a bit cooler in Seattle. So
we're here with an episode.
We're here.
And that's what matters.
And let's do it. Let's heat it up.
Oh. Let's turn on the smoker.
Turn on
what I'm saying.
Because, as I think we mentioned last week in our Oopsie Poopsie Two Hotsies, we've both been watching the Netflix series Barbecue Showdown.
I keep wanting to call it the American Barbecue Showdown. I also sometimes call it the Barbecue Bake Off, which I know is completely wrong. But hey, what are you going to do?
I think I've said it repeatedly. It is like, how would you make British Bake Off but American? Like, well, not baking.
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah,
barbecue.
A cooking show, a cooking competitive show that actually makes me hungry. Yes, we have talked about season 2 before. Mm-hmm. I think we briefly touched on season 1 back in the day, but season 2 definitely was like a step up in quality.
Right. Well, this is the joke that apparently replacing the two nondescript hosts with Michel Buteau was.
Hold on. Replaced them with Netflix's Michel Buteau.
Right. I love that. Like, Netflix is like, wow, you're good at these shows. Would you like to do more?
She's like, yes, I would, because paycheck.
And I will say, I appreciate that she did not refer to $50,000 being a life-changing amount of money.
Right.
Which is her normal, that's her circle comment. But no, so it's Barbecue Showdown, and it's very much it's a reality show. It's a competitive cooking show. But honestly, like, what a show. Like, I had such, every time it comes on, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this is the quality I crave, or the content.
That's a good place to start. Even if we talked about this the last time we talked about, when we talked about season 2, it's a good time to recap, like, why in a world full of competitive reality shows, why, like, this one kind of, especially for us, is so attractive, right? And for me, it is the same reason why I like the Great British Baking Show, is that it is a competitive show, but it's not a cutthroat, alliance-based, strategy-based, people at their worst to get the prize.
Right. It was them actually, like, just trying to do their best. And,
exactly.
And as people, like, being, like, supportive of each other, being helpful.
Yeah.
And the judges, right? There's no Paul Hollywood being kind of a douche canoe. These judges are, like, they ask questions. They seem supportive, like, to the point where I like the judges, right?
Yeah. I'm not to be a Paul Hall apologist. As I hinted at, like, I like this show for the same reason I like the Great British Bake Off, in that it's not collaborative, but it's definitely supportive. There's a community among the contestants.
Right.
I would say, even in the case of Paula Hollywood, I would actually, the person I'd throw under the bus would be someone like the American Idol's Simon Cowell. The judges as well for both Showdown and Bake Off despite what the complaints you said about Paul Hollywood, he can be gruff, but generally all the feedback is constructive, right? It's not like you suck, you should die. That's what Simon Cowell does.
Right? Yes,
but
Simon
it's still
Cowell.
like always like, oh, you should have done this. It could have been like this. You should have done this instead of this. I saw where you went wrong. It's not that you are a failure. It's just like the choices you made in this moment in stressful conditions are what caused the poor performance or whatever, right? But like, you're not bad at this. It's just like, it was a bad day kind of thing. I think going back to what you said, like what I love about this show and what I love about the very few instances of reality shows that I watch is that it's people doing what they're good at and being judged on the merits of their ability, right? And Barbecue Show, it sounds like I'm speaking of loftier ideas here, but we're talking about barbecue, and that's just what makes it awesome, right?
Well, and I would say, like, I realized this, watching this season I think it's like the 5th episode. One of the things they said, hey, you have to make a sausage.
Right.
And actually, like, we maybe paused the episode as I put out my thoughts about making sausage.
Yeah.
Now, and I realized that, like, I'm definitely, this is the show, like, Bake Off, I don't want to bake. Baking is witchcraft. But
we've covered this, yes.
But if I realize how much, if I could have the place to do barbecue, I would want to be that guy that like, I'm gonna go smoke some like.
I'm not the barbecuer in my household. My wife is. In fact, as we discussed last week, we have a freezer full of cow. And one of the jokes that we always talk about is like, it takes us forever to watch a single episode of a show because we always pause to talk about stuff, and a 30-minute show can last 2 hours. Mm-hmm. But definitely the case with this, where we're like, towards like the last 3 or 4 was when I really started grilling, pardon the pun. My wife was like, once they put up on the screen what the challenge is, like 2 proteins, 1 side, and a dessert. I'm like, okay, knowing what the basic overall challenge is here and what you have to get done, what would you do, right? And having that sort of fun mental challenge, and which makes it even more engaging for sure. So I like that was happening in both of our households.
Well, I think it's funny because when they talked about the sausage thing, I said, like, the first thing I said is like, actually, absolutely do not case it. And that became a thing where they showed 2 people trying to case their sausage, and they're like, oh, I can't get it to work. I'm having trouble because like casing sausage is really hard. And quite frankly, in that context, which was it was a tailgate challenge, you don't need tube steak. You just a sausage patty is just as good as anything else.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that was revealed in that challenge, which is they give them between 2 and maybe 8 hours to do a challenge, right? Because it's barbecue. But one of the things they do in this show, which is common, I'm sure, for all reality shows, competitive reality shows, is while the contestants are doing their thing, we get to listen to the asides that the judges are having. And it was cool to hear kind of what their expectations were for those to succeed at that challenge specifically, which is like they've only got like 2 hours, I think might have been the
I think it was a short one.
And the judges were saying like the smart thing to do is to not use a casing because we don't have the time for that.
Right, and that was like I felt like, oh wow, they're saying the same thing I just said. Like I was like,
I'm smart.
Oh wow, I know
Self
something.
high five.
To me, it is this. I think it does capture a similar thing to what Bake Off does, which is it's the kind of thing you watch at home and you're like, oh, I could do that. Mm-hmm. Obviously not everyone does, but like it is kind of like, but you could. A lot of people could, probably have like some sort of barbecue in their backyard, right? They're like,
right.
Well, I could do some of this shit, Obviously, you're not going to build a weird sand pit thing, like you're not. But like you could say, like I could try cooking this, seeing what I see, and that's I think what I actually really find I enjoy about it, right?
What I also like. Again, it really comes back to this idea that I love to have, and it even comes across in like the kind of video games I often find myself enjoying the most. Where I think I've said it on the show before, like I like to play games where you're just a character kind of doing their job, and similarly, these are shows that are people, like I said, doing what they enjoy doing, what they're good at doing. But that being said, I really, because of that conceit, the cast, for lack of a better word, that they bring onto the show is still very, especially for the show which is obviously kind of America centric to an extent, but for those that don't know, America's a big country, right? And so we not only get a spread of people from different cultural backgrounds here in the States, but also different expertise levels. We got people that have been doing this for
generations.
They have been doing it for generations, but yeah, they are the next generation of a long line of pit masters. We also got some people like in this season we had that and we had someone that started barbecuing in 2021,
right?
And they both excelled and faltered at different points for different reasons, but never for necessarily lack of ability. It's just because of what we talked about earlier. Just like it was a bad day. Well,
and this is kind of what the show like it does, right? And, you know, it's like I remember last season, you know, there's the fellow that, you know, he made sausage and he had it hanging in such a way that like basically it burned or the casing split and like fell and stuff, and he was like, oh, and you're like, yeah, that was probably like a pretty obvious physics thing, right? But again, you make mistakes. You're in a stressful situation. It is nice to see it where it is. You could imagine yourself doing the same thing, right? Like one of the competitors basically was making like a puff pastry and left out half the butter.
Yes,
and that probably was what like really solidified them losing. Was like,
right.
Oh shit, I left out half the, and it was like, I love it, by the way, the way the producers frame it is like cut over to just like the half a stick of butter sitting there
on the counter
by itself, like, oh wow, you forgot me. And that's the kind of thing like I've done that. Like, why is there still the ingredient sitting on the counter that was supposed to go in the soup, you know?
Right, but not as like fatal as what you see sometimes on Bake Off. It's like, oh, I confused the baking soda for sugar, right?
Oh yeah, I mean Bake Off. Well, because baking again is witchcraft.
Yeah,
it's a lot like
if you're not a master of the dark arts, you can't do baking.
Yeah, I feel like baking is like, oh no, we like, oops, I left out the boop.
Again, my argument is like, oh, put it in a drawer to make it work. Like, stop it.
A proofing drawer. Like, I'm sorry, a what?
Sure, whatever you want. Don't tell me that's real.
And I also want to say about Barbecue Showdown is they find characters, right? Like these people.
Yes.
I mean, I want to.
That goes through all 3 seasons. Remember Shotgun?
Yeah. Like they're all weird people, which is kind of part of the charm, right? Like I will say this season, I want to. I mean, there's quite a few characters I had fondness for. I mean, I was a big Sloan fan.
All of them. I actually liked all the characters. I think
I want to really throw out a podcast like thumbs up to Kareem. The Egyptian cowboy, like
the Egyptian cowboy.
The whole joke that this is a man that like he came to Texas to visit and was so enamored by barbecue, he moved there and became a barbecuer. And you're like,
and he runs a successful like
food truck or
truck.
Something.
Yeah,
like it's just like so overcome by the joy of barbecue. I that was like another one where. It was just great to see the things he does and kind of the weird flavors he did.
Right. And I think that also speaks to what I really like about I should say, like, I guess spoilers for season 3 of Barbecue Showdown, but I don't think there's any real reason to talk about who won and who lost, really. We're kind of just enamored by what the show is. And part of that is going back to what we were talking about before, the sort of camaraderie of the show. Mm-hmm. I guess I'll spoil this. Kareem didn't make it all the way to the end, which was a surprise to me. But one of the things I really like about the show, as well as other reality shows that I enjoy, that have this sort of competitive judges judging performance kind of aspect, unlike American Idol or The Voice, because the cast is small, and this is kind of another topic I want to touch on, actually touches on something we were talking about before recording, or I guess mid-recording, talking about like episode... how many episodes there are, how many people there are in the cast. It's a fairly small cast for reality shows. There's only 9 people at the beginning, only 8 episodes. And so it's a very focused show, but also it's a cast that's clearly through watching it gets to know each other. And I'm not just talking about the contestants, but the judges. And especially when you get to that, final half of the series, like when someone gets bumped because of a bad day, like, I have no doubt that those judges, when these people go back to their lives, wherever they're going, yeah, sure, they didn't win what was the prize? Like $50,000?
$50,000 in a smoker.
In a smoker. But I have no doubt that those judges, if the contestant, like Kareem, like if he reached out to them, they'd be like, hell yes, I'll tweet about your food truck, right? Like, it's a community that's really building throughout the season. And no one, to that extent, and this is I can't even really say this about the Bake Off. Like, no one really loses in a small show like this. Everybody that walks away, especially once they kind of develop that camaraderie, is going to be getting something out of this. Something that you actually believe what they say. When they say on the exit interviews, it's like, this is a really great experience, best experience of my life. I'll be taking the lessons I learned here and actually building from them. Like, I actually believe it with this show because what really comes across is these relationships that were formed and the network that's being created just by being on the show.
I think a lot about the fact that, years and years ago, I talked about the show King of the Nerds.
Yeah.
And how, a friend of mine was on the show and she won. And how, but like she actually, now married to another contestant on the show now.
No, yeah.
Weird story. But anyway, the thing there is that they actually talk about how they had group chats with a lot of the other people on the show. And I will say that Barbecue Showdown, I actually believe that, assuming that all these people know how text works, right. That they probably are like, hey, whoever, what do you think about this and whatever, including with the judges, right? Like, that they're like, yeah, hey, we'll try this, this thing or this whatever thing. I can believe that because that's what it felt like. Right. And I like that. I think it's a neat thing that they're all now like amateurish barbecuers who like have this group of friends, essentially support group of comrades, of fellow people that they shared this experience with, and they've done some weird stuff, right? Like they do weird stuff, like why don't you barbecue? Like in barbecue in a sand pit. Like sure, right. I guess
they threw all these people for a loop with like what was episode 3 or 4? Like for lack of a better word, like an Asian market. Like here's like weird fish you've never seen before, or something like that. Here's
some weird cuts. Go do it. Like I like that kind of stuff. I think that is neat. And just to see, obviously people talk about, the barbecue experience and different types of barbecues. Barbecue, I've said this before and I'll say it repeatedly. In the United States, barbecue is kind of like what someone described, sausage in Germany or wine in France.
Yeah,
like
every regional barbecue
has their every region has their very unique kind. And here it's very much so. You see that where they talk about like, I'm from here, so we do this kind of barbecue. I'm from Texas, so we do a Texas barbecue. I'm from Tennessee, so this is what we do. And how it's still like it's a, similar concepts, similar things. I mean, the brisket thing, right? When they're like, hey, we're going to do a brisket, and one of the people's like, I've never done a brisket. And they say like brisket's kind of like the king of barbecue meats, right? It's like, yeah, we don't do brisket. We do pork where I'm from, right? Yeah. So like, shit, I'll figure it out.
Right. Let me just run through. And again, if you haven't seen the show, this isn't going to mean a lot to you. But for Andrew's enjoyment, we had 9 people starting the show. We had Shatika, Gerald, Sloan, Kareem, Stacy, Melissa, Kent, Luis, and Tung. Was there anybody you thought would stick around longer than they actually did? I know for me, I bring that up because one of the characters I had earmarked, one of the people I had earmarked, I don't know why, because they are, man. Because of the fact that they were such a character, one of the people I had kind of earmarked as kind of going further than they did was, and you'll probably remember him, if not by name, then by description, Kent, right, the cowboy. Yeah. I was just kind of envisioning him as like, yeah, he might not be super bougie, to use the language of the show, but in that sort of cowboy camping kind of experience, you got to do a lot with very little in a short amount of time. I'm like, I could see him pulling surprises out of his back pocket, which I'm sure he has done on the trail. But
not in the show.
Did not go as far as I expected. So poor Kent. But I'll raise a glass to him because he was fun.
It was one that's, I think they were all, and actually like the idea that sometimes you see people in shows and you're like, oh, you're gonna be an asshole or whatever. Right? Yeah. Like, and actually everyone, like, he seemed like he's one of those guys where I can see him being like, maybe he's kind of like a real conservative. Like, no, he seemed like, like he's very supportive of the other people, including some very, very characters.
No, yeah, that's on his elimination episode. He was one of the first people to say, "I love you, man," and like considering there was a very diverse group of people.
Right. Well, and I there was in one episode, Sloan, who's one of the competitors, she says, "Oh, I don't do that, but my wife does."
Right.
And it was this thing where obviously they all knew, they'd known each other for a bit, but it's like there wasn't like a I don't know about
oh my
lesbian,
god. Yeah.
It was just like they're like, yeah, all right, you do barbecue.
Anybody else kind of stood out to you aside from maybe the final 3 or 4?
Well, I mean, Sloan and Kareem were the two that I really kind of like. They were like my faves for me. But I think it was it was a fun group of people to see kind of the things they do and sometimes things didn't work out. Some people, especially those first episode people, Tongue, yeah,
Tongue and Luis, yeah.
It's like, oh, who are you again?
He just had a real bad day, man. I felt bad for Tongue, yeah.
Well, and that's so much of the show is that sometimes you have a good day, sometimes a bad day.
Someone has to go home, right? That's the thing, yeah.
And I will say once again, not quite our hometown, but just to hear Santa Maria Grill get dropped a lot of that I forget that is literally a thing named after the town next to ours.
I thought you were going to bring up Kevin Bloodsoe's San Luis Obispo connections, but
he didn't drop another one though.
No, he did not in the show. But he spent some time in the Central Coast.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's what he said last season when he talked about Central Santa Maria Tri-Tip. Yeah. No, I do like, and one thing I do want to say this season, the other judge, God, whose name is escaping me, angry
Melissa
Cookson. She.
I mean, you should remember her name more than anybody else's. It's literally Cook isn't her name.
But she's definitely working on her. It's this thing where because she's got the kind of, forgive the language, the resting bitch face, right? And she will often be they're like, is this? She'll hold up this rib. Do you think this is cooked or whatever?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, and she was like, this is the best rib I've ever had. Okay.
But that's the thing. She's starting to kind of, I don't know if this is the right metaphor, but cry wolf. She does it all the time.
Yeah,
right?
she knows who she is now, and she's playing into it. I do really. What was it? It was the burger. It was when Sloan made a hamburger. The line was, I did not like this burger. And you're like, yikes, what a way to start. I absolutely love this burger. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay.
Part of it is also speaks to the smallness of the show, where she did that because she was giving people shit. Sloan is the person that we said is the 4th generation Texan pitmaster. Mm-hmm. And in the one-on-one sort of interviews with the off-screen, host, Sloan was like, well, I've done this and I've done this and I've won these awards. But anytime she's actually in the competition, she's like, I suck. I don't know how to fuck. She had the worst confidence I've not ever seen, but definitely of the season. And I think Melissa has, for lack of a better word, is kind of being a bully in a entertaining way. It's like, oh, Sloan doubts everything she does. And so she definitely leaned into her bullshit of this is not good. It's great kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, but it was fun to see. And like I said, for me, it was. I'll be upfront here. About the time that we finished watching the show, I realized that I have the ability to grind meat at home. So I actually, because I have a overpriced food processor my mother bought for me. Oh. So actually, I just tried my first at actually making my own ground from meat sausage. Didn't work out. I'm still working on it. But I was inspired. I was watching these guys. I could do this thing. I mean, I'm not smoking because I don't have a barbecue. I don't have a smoker, but.
You should still film those one-on-one interviews like they do in the show. You're like, well, I tried my best this time, but next time, if I get another chance, Lord willing.
Me in the living room just by myself, that cut didn't come out good, but next time.
Have a lower third pop up.
Yeah, I will say how much I really enjoy the show. It is, and maybe it's just because I like the idea of cooked meat, but
indeed,
I do just. They kind of show this is a thing that people do. It's the idea that one of the contestants literally started doing this 2 or 3 years ago. One of the guys was came from Egypt and was so magically overtaken, but at the same time
never took off his Stetson.
The Egyptian with a Stetson.
And like on point mustache, the most on point mustache I've ever seen in my life. Damn. Like I kept seeing him like he's definitely younger than me. But I'm like, I would go to him for advice.
Yeah, it's like the Egyptian Sam Neill.
No, Sam Elliott. Sam
Elliott. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oof, mix up. It's the Egyptian Sam Elliott. You know.
I mean, I'd go to Sam Neill for advice. Absolutely.
But it is the thing. I find that when the show comes on, I always go to people and say, you know what you need to do? You need to watch Barbecue Showdown.
Honestly, if you like the Great British Bake Off or Baking Show, as it's called over here, you should watch Showdown. Like it's as good, or as some people might say, better at this point. I'm really excited that it's added to the pantheon of the kind of stuff that I like to see in terms of competition, of people doing what they love, that they're good at it, and it's a competition of ability in the moment rather than judging the person as a human being. So it goes up with Great British Baking Show. It goes up with Alone. I think I've talked about on the show, where it's a survival show. It has nothing to do with cooking, but it's about people just kind of last as long as you can with the skills and talents that you have. And of course, the pinnacle of this type of reality show, combat missions.
Oh wow! What a throwback. Sponsored by the Chevy Avalanche.
Yes, look at our weird little truck that probably doesn't do anything. I will say it's probably more truck capable than the Cybertruck.
The low bar.
So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed in this episode, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other users on our Facebook page. Listeners, listeners, whatever.
You can find us on other social media as well, although probably not as often as it used to be, at the places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark at dice.camp. Find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics.
Well, you're at our website, forallintents.net. You can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find this show simulcast in YouTube. If you do listen to the show on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. We should probably say, and Andrew, this might be a surprise to you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday if it's your birthday within the next,
I'll say happy birthday last week to super friend of the show, Taylor.
Oh yes, he turned 17 finally. I'm very happy for him.
Yeah. Almost able to buy cigarettes.
Almost. That dream will come true, Taylor. I promise. No, just kidding. He probably turned 74, but he looks young, and it's very upsetting. No, he's wonderful, our on-the-ground DC correspondent, and we wish him nothing but the best. But actually, with that being said, unless Andrew decides otherwise, there probably won't be an episode next week. I'm going to be traveling. I'll be out of the state and not be in Washington, unfortunately. So keep an eye out for when I return, and we can once again talk about nerdy and geeky things. Oh. Andrew, thoughts?
Shit, that's a challenge. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Maybe we can get Taylor on the horn, but before his bedtime. That's getting weird. We're getting into weird territory here. So until you get to bed at your bedtime, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
So literally, like, you would say maybe watch 7 out of the 8 episodes.
And then imagine what you think the finale should be, because it will be better than what you'll watch.
That actually makes it literature, right?
I hate agreeing in any capacity with arguably the worst humans in the world.
Fair.
Star Wars fans.
Recording.
Recorders
are on.
Audio as bits and bytes. Beep boop bop.
Boop 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 boop.
Boop 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 boop.
I should tell Glenn to be more quiet as he yells about Star Wars. All right, we clapped. I guess we can.
Let's barbecue this shit. Okay, here's Glenn.
Hello, Glenn.
You got 10 hours to make me the best brisket in the entire world.
And the acolyte couldn't even do that.
It did. What it made was
a dookie.
A soggy bottom T-bone. I will say, the reminding myself of combat missions, poisoned my Instagram algorithm, because I decided to, on Instagram, look up Boz El Boz.
Oh boy.
Who, not as bad as I was expecting, but definitely not on our side.
But also not surprising.
Yeah, I know. But I still love him. Like, he's still great. I mean, in that limited context within that show, what a character.
Jesus Christ. Glenn is still complaining about fucking Star Wars on the phone. It's like, I'm kind of amused that, like, wow, he's so passionate about how much he was like upset about this episode. He's talking to people about it.